GM, everyone, and welcome to the Modern Market, where every day we discuss everything to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, the pre-sale market as of lately, and how to make some or a lot of money on the internet. Loaded up for discussion today, we have, and I'm glad that I have Phunky with me for this show, the odds for the US government shutdown spiking to 84% on Polymarket. I want to get into actually what that means. Is it affecting our bags? Is it something to worry about? Is it the nothing burger? So Phunky's definitely going to break that one down for us. A couple news from the SEC to work with tokenized asset issuers, also taking a clear stance that DePIN launches are outside of the jurisdiction. Thought that's quite interesting to give a bit of a roundup on that side of the regulatory spectrum as well. And then kind of left field news that Kazakhstan is now launching a crypto fund. CZ posted that yesterday as well. The first thing they buy is BNB. Definitely want to get into this one as well. I see Phunky laughing. Also going to have the latest price action crypto NFTs and a bit of a discussion on strategy and digital asset treasuries in general. So stay tuned for that. I do have, as I said, Phunky with me in the co-host seat, and we're almost ready to get into it. But before we do that, just a reminder, friends, that nothing that we say here is financial advice. We do not know anything for sure. Please proceed with caution and do your own research, even on a green day like this, especially on a green day like this. With that out of the way, Phunky, how are you doing? It's good to have you back on screen.
GM, my friend, always love joining and the streams. I'm doing great. Hopefully English is already watching, because yesterday I was a guest on the Daily Bone, and the first thing he said was, "Where's the chain?" So I figured we are on the precipice of Uptober, and I need to come with that full BBE. So I got the classic Bitcoin shirt on, the gold chain, the HODL hat, the whole thing. And, right before the show, when we were chatting, I was thinking, oh, it's such a bummer. Like, I don't have cool lighting behind me the way that Rahim or Bread can change it to the new green hue. And then I thought, wait a minute, my Phunky sign like as an app, and you can change. I wasn't able to get the exact color, but I tried to dial it in, make it green. Right, we're about to experience a whole lot of green in Q4, so it's very timely, and excited to be here. Thanks, Ledge.
Yeah, love that. Love the green color as well. Seems that all like green colored projects are doing pretty well at the moment. You said October. You think we're gonna have a nice Q4, something to look forward to?
I mean, of course, I'm insanely bullish all the time, right? I mean, I'm firmly in the camp with Bread on the infinite institutional bid, and it's going to be up and to the right over the very long term. But I think we're due, and this is an interesting thing. You do wonder how much there is a cabal when it comes to Tradfi, more so than even just what happens in crypto, because I'll never forget, probably in the summer, I was having a conversation with David, my colleague and friend. You guys know David from Silvermine Capital and Global Stake. And he was saying he was talking to some very high level banking folks in London. And they basically said, like, wait till you see Q4 this year. We're just like absolutely going to send all the markets. So I'm starting to think that that's just the case, that they're just waiting for some of these things to shake out. And it's just going to be launchpad time and take off.
Love it. Love it. Love the Tradfi cabal being bullish for our bags. Look, English is here, by the way. I see him in the comments that he almost got liquidated on XPL and Plasma, which is down a fair bit. Plasma went all the way up to 160. And where are we now with Plasma? Do I even want to know? 1.10 or so? Oh, 1.07.
Oh, I fell out of my range.
I missed the short. English is saying legendary, call your friends at Plasma. I missed the short on this, but yeah, I can't be bothered to enter a short position now, so I'm just gonna wait that out and see. But speaking about prices, let's get into the price action, starting as per usual with Bitcoin first. BTC is up almost 1% over the last 24 hours, currently at 113K, or just $50 shy of 113K. ETH also up 1.2%, $4,156 for one ETH. That looks good. XRP is flat, 2.84. BNB is up just a touch, still holding above $1,000 at 1,009. Solana is flat on the day, $206 for that. Hype had a run yesterday, was up 7%, corrected down a bit, and is currently at $45. Phunky, if you could quickly mute yourself, you had a bit of background noise going on. And Sui is also just down a touch at $3.20. Checking in with the meme coin side of things. Let's see what's going on there. Mostly just looks flat, to be honest. Doge is flat, SHIB is flat, Pepe is flat, or just down 0.4, 0.2%, nothing worthwhile commenting on. Pengu down 2%, Trump is down 2%. Fartcoin is down at to 60 cents, holy shit. But up 0.5%, hey, over the last 24 hours. Nothing, from what I can tell, too exciting going on at a first quick glance. Getting into the main headlines, I said at the top of the show, on the one hand, I do want to get into this government shutdown news. Why is this spiking? What does it mean? Is it affecting our bags? Is it something to not be worried about? We obviously have historical data on that to look at. Second piece of news, a couple pieces that actually is from the SEC. On the one hand, commenting on tokenized asset issues and that they want to work with them. On the other hand, saying the DePIN is outside of their jurisdiction, and that is not something they want to look in. And then, as the third and final piece of news, we're gonna look into Kazakhstan's crypto fund, which just started purchasing or will start purchasing BNB. But before we do that, let's also take a quick look at the NFT side of things to give you some of the price action that we are seeing right there. Moonbirds are flat over the day, still above a 3 ETH floor, 3.08. Pudgies are down 1.5%, 10.09, getting closer to falling under 10 ETH. Miladies up a touch, up 2%, 1.87 ETH floor. Bored Apes are flat, 9.09. Genesis collection is moving yet again. Those are these OpenSea gems, up 35% on the week, 17% on the day, 0.03 ETH floor there. Kaito Genesis NFT also continuing the run, up 200% on the week. Currently at a 1.5 ETH floor. That certainly is to do with the limitless pre-sale, which saw a massive oversubscription. And talking about NFTs, have to also check in with the hyper NFTs. Insane price action, millions of volumes over the last day. Floor is, however, down a bit. It is at 1.1K hype. So it is at $50,000 yesterday when we checked in. That was at 1.4K. However, and I think that came via Cyrus, we do see like the one-of-ones selling for significant six-figure amounts. And I think one sold initially for 90K, then for 200K, then for 400K. So there's a lot of interest in this collection at the moment. I'm going to pause here for a second, Phunky, and check in with you if you have any thoughts on the hyper collection.
I found out yesterday that one of the fellow kings in the kingdom has one because he was very active in hype. Because I learned that apparently you had to be in the top. There was a cutoff for points that you had to get one, and he was saying he fumbled half his bag. Like when the airdrop happened, he just effectively said, "Okay, I'm just gonna sell half at $3 or whatever." And everybody was kind of like, "Oh man, that really sucks." But he got this. And so, he was just thinking, I'm probably just going to sell it to get a bunch more hype back because he's not too into NFTs to begin with. Like he literally has just one queen in terms of like a holder. He's not a huge NFT holder in general. But it was good to know just like somebody that I knew, actually got one. Not surprised that the price came down on them, but I still think like a lot of what, was said yesterday, and we talked a little bit about it on the Daily Bone too. Like it's just sort of like this Veblen good for these nouveau riche people. There were so many people who became like instant millionaires through hype or liquid. So like, what's it to them when they're spending, 60 plus K and, for some of these things. So, I think it would be, I don't think we're going to see a crash. I don't think we're going to see, I'd be hard pressed to see them go under 1,000 hype, right? Because I mean, if they went to all these top tier holders in terms of the amount of points, they're all doing very well in terms of how much hype they have. So, I think that and the ones that are the one-on-ones are going to continue to fetch a premium, I think.
Yeah, very much agree with that. Said on the show yesterday as well. I don't think that the people received that are necessarily struggling for money. So even though obviously the floor is correcting down a bit, should hold up pretty nicely. And I'm still contemplating whether I want one or not. I think no.
I saw somebody tweet something, apparently like where it showed a picture where there was the checkbox where you got to select, did you want all tokens, or did you see that tweet? And somebody said like, you just fumbled 50K if you checked just the tokens and you didn't like want the NFT or whatever.
Yeah. You know why? Because people were speculating back then if this is gonna like somehow decrease your hype airdrop if you are greedy and want to go for both for tokens and the NFT. So there was like a bit of tactics around that, but it was not the case. It didn't have any impact.
Oh, wow.
On your hype airdrop, from what I can tell.
See, and I wondered if they had reduced like the allocation at 1,000 tokens or something like that, and that's why they kind of set like a floor. So that's interesting that they just gave the NFT away. Period. I didn't know that. That's wow.
Yeah.
Fumble.
And also maybe one additional thought on that, because I've seen this point in the timeline so often, where people saying this is how you should do an NFT collection, airdrop to the holders, don't do a pre-sale, don't do whitelisted mints, etc., etc. I completely disagree with that. And I think Whale has been also pushing back on that on the timeline, saying that, look, this is a $50 billion FTV chain, super successful perp decks, one of the biggest fee generators in crypto. Obviously, their NFT is going to do well. If you are not in that position and you still execute like that, it does not mean that your NFT is gonna go to gajillions and flip Pudgy Penguins and other collections as a result of that. Obviously, there's been other projects who have been doing their NFT distribution like that, one of which being Ethos, the platform who distributed 256 Ethos validators to like the early top users. And they're holding up very well at a 2 ETH floor, but it's just not a guaranteed success if this is the distribution metric that you're choosing. So just wanted to push back on that. But with that being said, let's quickly get into the Web3 roundup. After that, I want to get into a discussion with you, Phunky, on strategy, Michael Saylor, shareholder dilution. Let's get you some other news from around the space first. Before we do that, first of which, SEC is coming with a trading hold of QMMM, which is a crypto treasury company. We spoke about that on the show, that they are looking into that. They do see some weird things going on with the stats. So this is the first company that has been affected of that, so to speak. Other piece of news which I like quite a lot is the tokenized gold market is getting very, very close to $3 billion, 2.9 billion to be precise, on chain. Also hit a record September in terms of trading volume, surpassing 3.2 bill. And the main contestants there are, unsurprisingly, Tether Gold, XAUT, and Pax Gold. So PaxG, and PaxG saw $40 million in net inflows. Obviously, the reason for that being that the gold price is doing pretty well, hitting all-time high after all-time high yesterday, exceeded 3.8K. I think it's down a bit today, but we'll touch on that a bit later. Then in terms of the ETF approvals, SEC is telling issuers to pull the 19B4S filings and basically indicating that ETFs can be or will probably be approved pretty fast. I think the odds for the Solana ETF shot up massively as a result of that on Polymarket as well. That is to do with the streamlining of the listing process, which we had as one of the main headlines. I think it was last week. Then this just came before the show. Meteora announced the TGE date. The MET token is to come on the 23rd of October with quite some interesting distribution mechanisms. We'll probably touch on that a bit more once we get closer to the actual TGE event. Then speaking of pre-sales, Limitless, that's the one on Kaito, prediction market with a fully liquid TGE. They raised $93.4 million in just 5 days are obviously massively oversubscribed. I think they are oversubscribed by more than 90x. That is on the one side of things, and then on the other side, we spoke yesterday about the pre-sale for yield basis on Legion. This one is also doing pretty well. That saw $150 million in commitments. Only 2 mil of those 150 mil will be allocated for the merit sale, which was the one people had to apply for yesterday. Then the final maybe piece of news when it comes to the pre-sales, we also saw Tulip raising 200 mil at 1 bill valuation. So it seems like we are somehow getting back into a pre-sale season. Probably unsurprising if you look at all the altcoin indicators that at the same time, the altcoin indicators are also moving up. Out of all these pre-sales, the only thing I did participate, no, not the only thing, sorry. I did participate in both actually, in Limitless and in yield basis on Legion. So I'm quite curious to see these ones play out, especially the yield basis one, because that will TGE in October. It is the first time Legion also has partnered up with the Kraken Launchpad, and I feel like that might come out as a good indicator to see the appetite in the market for the Launchpad TGEs and how we are feeling about a potential revival of the pre-sale meta in Uptober, not October. Phunky, your thoughts on everything to do with pre-sales?
So my first question about the pre-sale thing was because I think you said that you did the cap, but then they changed the cap and revised it downward on, was it the limitless one? Did you get that like
No,
excess back?
that was yield basis. I think the initial
Oh, it was
cap
yield basis. Okay.
was 25K, but then when I checked the project details, it was 10K, and I did put in 25. Obviously, that will get refunded. But I think today, in 3-ish hours or so, those like merit sale applications will close, will get reviewed. Then we'll see the results of that, how much allocation people will get. And that is quite an interesting scoring system, by the way, which they're using, which is they're looking at your on-chain activity. They are looking at your X account. They're looking at your dev contributions, if you have a GitHub, et cetera, et cetera. Combine all of that into a score. Then you also have to actually write a cover letter for the sale as to why you want to be an investor in this project and why you would be net positive as an investor. And this will then determine your allocation. So yeah, let's see how that will play out.
What do you, just out of quick, two things. One, Atari is asking about the gold chain, and to whoever's asking in the DMs, I'm just trying to summon that BBE, right? Like, I mean, big Bitcoin energy. We're about to start October. That's the reason why we're wearing it. But more importantly, I wanted to ask you about that whole thing because I saw you talking about it in the Modern Market Chat. What do you think of this like application, you know, to kind of qualify yourself as an investor who would be good for the project? This is the first time I've ever heard of such a thing. Have you ever done this before, Legendary? I'm just curious to see like your thoughts on this and the whole process.
Yeah, I've seen that. Like, it's not the first time that I did that. Some investment rounds had something similar going as well. Some, God, what was it? It wasn't Portal. Some other like public pre-sale applications had questionnaires as you want to participate in that. Some of the AVEX tokens even did that. They were like more joking questions, which went viral on the timeline as well. This one was like more so done in a serious way. I don't really see a point in that, I think, because you either will write something chat GPT-esque, or you will come up with, I don't know, whatever stuff you put in that cover letter. Some people did 2 sentences, some people put a whole essay in there. But ultimately, you have such a massive amount of oversubscription that I don't think people will actually look through that. If anything, you use an AI to filter that. And most AIs like AI content as well. And just because they already are using that that scoring system, which will probably be the most important criterion to see how much you get from a sale, I think that is just the more important thing. Maybe you can use the cover letter to like sort of filter out people who like completely skip it, write in stuff that is actually negative. Kind of like if you fly in the States on an ESTA and they ask you if you're here to commit acts of terrorism, import drugs, and you will have the 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000 people being like, "Yep, I'm here to commit a terroristic act," and they're like, "No, go home." Maybe it's like sort of a red flag filtering, but I don't see any point beyond that in the process.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And that's what you kind of answered the other question I had in terms of how they're going to filter through all these. But to your point, they're probably just going to use AI, and then AI is just going to pick other AI responses and so on and so forth. So just breaking news, looks like the last kinetic points distribution is going to happen on October 16th. Everybody's kind of talking about it in the modern market chat. So got about 2 more weeks or so, looks like, to finish farm. I got to that way too late. I think I have, it's funny, I let my things go out of range and I just let it sit there. I'm like, well, the snapshot's coming, and I have all this K hype now. So hopefully I'll get a bunch of points this week before I adjusted my Project X pools. But yeah,
I think airdrops will be very, very nice in Q4. Is already a ton to do. There is a couple more projects that I have on my list that I need to review and see if there's something good to farm from that. And it's been actually, last thought on that, it's been quite a while since I felt like that I need to take notes, have a list of projects that need to be reviewed, think more about like capital allocation for farming. And that's something I typically like a lot because I think I'm good at it. It's just, to me, more enjoyable than, I don't know, the meme coin trading side of things, which we did last time or last year around this time. Anyhow, with that being said, before we get into the main headlines, I want to touch on this article, which says 94% of Strategy's Bitcoin buys since August were from diluting MicroStrategy. Obviously, there was another buy this morning. It was, I think, 22 mil worth of BTC that Saylor bought. And maybe to go a big back in time, it was on July 31st when Strategy provided clear guidance to its shareholders saying that they will not issue MSTR below a 2.5x MNAV except to pay interest and dividends. Then 2 weeks later, mid of August, they did revise that dilution promise, saying like when it's otherwise deemed advantageous to the company. And they have diluted the common shareholders by more than 3 million shares to spend $1.1 billion to buy around 10K, a bit more than 10K BTC. And I want to bring this up specifically, Phunky, because the last time the two of us hosted a show, you gave this fantastic breakdown on Strategy's vision and how all those different product offerings work together, and made the point that Saylor is like super aware of that dilution aspect, and that you like this revamped vision quite a lot, but it feels like quite a bit changed since then. You had some more critical comments on the show as well. So just want to pick your brain, see how you're currently thinking about strategy, how you're thinking about Michael Saylor's strategy. Is it something that you're more worried about now? Just want to get an update from you on that.
Sure. I mean, I'm not worried insofar as, full disclosure for those who hadn't heard my MicroStrategy story, I aped in 2020 when Saylor first announced, because when I was really starting to pay attention to crypto again in 2020, COVID boredom and all that happened, I first turned my attention to equities, and I was doing a lot in my Roth IRA, and where I was buying Bitcoin miners, Bitcoin options on the miners for dirt cheap, for pennies, made tons of this all tax free. And then I think it was probably like late summer or whenever Michael Saylor announced that they were going to start buying Bitcoin. And I'm like, okay, well, this is just like a software company. So, long before we talked about DATs, this is 5 years ago. And so I just aped in and I bought some, and it seemed to very quickly become sort of the TradFi proxy darling for Bitcoin. And if you look at the chart from 2020, I think I bought it at like 120, 130, somewhere around there. Forget the exact number. By February of 21, like when Bitcoin really started climbing the wall, MicroStrategy just went bananas. And it like got to maybe $1,200. And I sold half my like stash back then. And so now what you're seeing here, these numbers add like do 10x, because there was a 10-for-1 split along at this point. So like in that previous pump, you can see going in 21 where it's like touching past 100, it got to like $1,200, sold half of it. So like as much as B-Check hates moon bags, like all of my MicroStrategy position now in the Roth IRA is a moon bag. So I'm not worried in that sense, because like what I have is effectively risk-free capital that I'm not too concerned about. Having said that, however, I do not like what he's doing. I think a lot of people who are very strong MicroStrategy bulls, Josh Mandel being a very particular one on the timeline, who's been very loud about this stuff, because he, like me, after watching that earnings call in July, which was, you couldn't have been more bullish, because they basically said like, we're effectively shutting the ATM window unless it's below, I forget the number, if it was 3 or 4, but there was like layers to it for like where they would tactically deploy strategically, and above 4, on the MNAV, they were like all out. We're just going to like issue shares and, we'll be going to town if the MNAV is that high. And then within like 2 weeks, they backed off from that promise. And all of a sudden, every single one of these buys, and it also explains, like, think about when MicroStrategy was issuing these new financial products like Strike and Strife and Stride and all these others, they were getting billions of dollars and they were buying massive tranches of Bitcoin. You look at all of the recent buys since then, they're little dribs and drabs. Oh, 96 Bitcoin. 122 Bitcoin. They're like tiny amounts, not used, we're used to seeing thousands of Bitcoin being purchased OTC when they were launching these new financial products. And so each one of these things, they are just continuing to dilute the shareholder. And I've watched it. Like, I mean, I don't look at my Roth very often, but like every once in a while, I'll type in the MicroStrategy price. Like the last time I looked, it was at like 308. And so you can tell that it's had this dilutive effect. And I even said something to Michael Saylor yesterday on a tweet on X, not that he reads a response or cares, but like I said, meanwhile, the MSTR price continues to grind down as you dilute all of us. So what was once, sort of the darling of the market, and I think it's changed to the fundamental dynamic, because we now have, Bitcoin ETFs. Like, why mess with it if you can just buy IBIT? Right? Like, I mean, or you could buy calls on what BlackRock's got out there or others, right? I mean, here I am wearing the HODL hat for Van Eck. So like plenty of good ETF options. MicroStrategy always was carrying a premium. Bread's talked about it. You guys have talked about it in terms of these DATs are all going to revert to 1 and sometimes even below NAV. So, I'm not amused by this. I think that if the market really does rip, is MicroStrategy going to follow suit? Yes. But what I think the question that remains is, how much is it going to lag Bitcoin now? Whereas before it was the leader, like you were getting that premium. That's been squeezed. All that juice has been squeezed out of this lemon. So it makes me wonder, even if the market rips, is it going to move up? Yes, I think so. Might I start doing covered calls and let some be taken away? Yeah, probably. Like, because I still have hundreds of shares left, and it's like, maybe I could just like do covered calls, and if they get taken away at $400 or $500, like, hey, okay, more cash for the next downturn, and just wait for things to subside. But yeah, I think it was a strategic mistake to make that announcement very publicly, and then 2 weeks later turn around and say, oh, just kidding, we're going to keep buying Bitcoin with our shares, and we're going to dilute all the shareholders in the process.
Yeah, that is a super, super helpful summary. Appreciate you for that, Phunky. Just really wanted to have your deep understanding on that and kind of get your perspective, whether you find that worrying or not. But it seems to be the case and that's not only your sentiment. You said other strategy bulls feel the same. It is annoying. It's obviously something that comes across very disappointing to take back that announcement after such a short period of time. But ultimately, you at the moment not worried about like a systemic risk for BTC as a result of that. Sounds good.
No, not at all. I mean, and I think that's, if I bought higher, I'd be pissed, right? Like, again, I would couch all of what I'm saying, my comments in particular, that like,
yes,
it's risk-free capital to me in terms of that. So like, I don't really care if it gets down to like 200. I don't know. Like, I might just hang out to it, because what's the, again, I already made money on it. So.
Fair enough. Look, with that being said, we got 25-ish minutes left in the show. I want to get into the first piece of news, which is to do with the US government shutdown, the poly market on that, to be specific, is US government shutdown in 2025 is up 59% currently at an 84% chance. And I want to, that being said, hand it to you, Phunky, just to give us a breakdown. What's a government shutdown? What does that mean? We had these things happening or being threatened in the past, and ultimately, is it something to be worried and concerned about or not?
I'm honestly surprised that the poly market's at 84%. So, for my fellow Americans, we're used to this. This is typically a nothing burger. So the way that this works is the Congress has to pass a budget, right? And that budget is supposed to last a year. We all know that they're spending like drunken sailors. It never ends up lasting a year. And so what they do is they get into discussions around a CR. In fact, just 2-ish weeks ago, or yeah, about 2 weeks ago, there was the Blockchain Association monthly member meeting, and they specifically talked about that they were working on a new CR, or continuing resolution. And that phrase basically is just sort of like a stopgap measure that the Congress will put into place that effectively says, like, okay, all these key services, we're going to make sure that they continue to run, and we're just going to pass like this mini budget that will last until the next point at which we have to kick the can down the road again. Now, the last time we actually had a shutdown, I can't even remember. I want to say John Boehner was like the Speaker of the House. I'd have to look it up. But they usually, if we even get to a government shutdown, they are very, very short-lived. It's something that, because if it were to happen, and people think that like the whole government just grinds to a halt, but there are certain essential personnel that are exempted from the shutdown, and they basically have to show up and work. And I don't know how that works out for their pay or whatever, but it's not like everybody just stops working. But many of like the military and all these things would continue on. But by and large, most of the functions of the bureaucracy itself will kind of grind to a halt. This is quite common. I mean, if you're paying attention to American politics, it happens all the time. Right now, I think the big sticking point is, Republicans are, it's got to do with sort of the healthcare stuff, which is a massive part of our GDP. Republicans are saying that if we go forward with what the Democrats want, then millions of illegal aliens are going to get healthcare. Democrats are framing it as, oh my gosh, the Republicans are taking away healthcare from your poor elderly grandma. Like, so it's just the typical partisan politics at play here. And they're just, I would imagine, get to the 11th hour, make it something to where it's important in the news cycle, and then they'll have some continuing resolution get passed to make sure that there's funding for the rest of the fiscal year. So again, I think it's much ado about nothing. If I were going to bet, I'm not a, poly market guy, I would put money on no. Right? Like, I just don't see it happening.
Gotcha. And you also made the point that if it happens, it's typically not lasting for a very, very long time. The last one that did last for longer was 35 days long, 2018, 2019, during the first administration of Donald Trump. But typically, shutdowns don't last that long. And I feel like one of the worries that I've seen expressed in a couple articles on the timeline was that even if there's a short shutdown of a couple of days, that this could slow down progress on crypto-specific regulation. I would probably make the point that if it's just a couple of days of a shutdown, that's not really going to have any impact. And then the other thing, and this is where I'm curious to get your perspective as well, and this comes from this article on Fortune, where UBS analyst, or not analyst, the bank's chief investment officer wrote a note saying that these temporary delays shouldn't delay cuts to the base rate. Also, if you check in on Polymarket, Fed decision in October is still at 81% for a 25 bips decrease. So a shutdown, or these shutdown talks, they could lead to a bit more volatility in the market, is the point that the Fortune article is making. But the rate cut should not be affected from that. Is this your view on this as well, Phunky, or do you have any divergent?
No, I mean, when you think about the Fed, this is a quasi-independent institution. It's not something that, like just the other day, I was talking to somebody on the timeline and they were saying, like, I don't know why Trump just doesn't fire Powell. I'm like, because he actually doesn't have the power to do so. Like, yes, presidents have a massive sway in the pick, but the Fed governor and board decides like who's ultimately going to sit in that seat. So, I don't think it's going to have an impact. Now, if there is a shutdown, I will say the market will react. I mean, 100%. Like, but if it does, it's going to be something very short-lived. And I completely concur with the article from Fortune, the author of it, because like you got to look past, the market, as you've pointed out many times on the show, Legendary, is very forward-looking. Like we're projecting out into the future. We're, these rate cuts, all these other things. There's a lot of tailwinds that are pushing the markets up and to the right. So like even if there were a government shutdown, and I totally forgot about the one during Trump, it would be very short-lived. The market's probably going to react negatively. But if anything, if it does dip, I mean, I think that whether you're talking equities or what have you, this is a great opportunity to buy, right? Because just look at the tariffs. I mean, I made some incredible Tesla buys by laddering in limit orders during that volatile period, knowing that it would all probably come out very quickly. And within a matter of weeks, everything had been restored and we were just resumed our upward traction.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Just maybe one final question to that. If you see this as a potential buying opportunity, if it happens, if we have volatility in the markets, because we had this, the reason I'm asking is because we had this portfolio discussion with Brett, with Bcheck, and myself over the last couple of weeks, versus in terms of where your attention is at, crypto versus stocks, and you just mentioned equities, you just mentioned Tesla buys. Where would you look right now if we see a shutdown happen, if we see volatility coming? Would you look into equity specifically, or would you look more into crypto dips? Like, just curious to see where your investment attention is at the moment.
I think both. And the reason I say both is I would love to increase hood, which just hit a recent all-time high, a new all-time high. So like I would love to get more hood exposure. I've been selling. Bread has, of course, infected my thinking, right, with coin. And even just when you look at the chart of coin versus hood, like I admittedly, I wish I bought hood like a year ago and it was like $15. I mean, things almost 10x. And I'm getting less confident in coin's ability to maintain that vice grip hold on just like it will always have an important place in the portfolio, sure. But like I'm now actively selling covered calls at 2 weeks out, just like, okay, if it hits this price, I'd be very happy to sell some. And all I'm going to do is take that and buy more hood with it, right? To just kind of further diversify. I'm not really diversifying outside the industry, but just diversifying like the exchange, portfolio. But on the crypto side, no, like I don't think we're at a point, even if there's dips, I mean, with the exception of a couple positions that I still have no exposure to that I'm slowly like DCing into, I don't think I'd want to. I think you guys, especially listening to the show a lot, I've come to see the wisdom in continuing to stack stables and just put those stables to work. Like I know there was one point Beachhead kind of laughed at me in the chat because I was like, I don't have any stables, like because I just, typically I'm always buying Bitcoin. And now like I just feel like listening to you guys talk and just seeing so many opportunities out there for putting stable coins to work and earning a very, very good yield. And it kind of started with hydration on Polkadot, admittedly. Like, I mean, because I was like, whoa, 22%, this is crazy. I literally took the cash out of my Amex high yield savings and I just turned it into stable coins, and that started it. And then of course, like with my father's passing, coming into some money there, like I just bought stables and just putting stables to work. So like on the crypto specific side, I don't think I would necessarily be buying a dip. We're entering Q4. Things are probably really going to get frothy, even if there is a dip. And I learned last cycle sometimes that always buy the dip is not necessarily the best strategy. I mean, on a long enough time horizon, sure. But I'll never forget, for instance, peeling profits and then like, oh, buy the dip. And I was buying Bitcoin because it went from like 60 down to like 45. And I just buy like a 10th of a Bitcoin or 20th of a Bitcoin, and then I'm like, oh, now I have no stables left. And then Bitcoin goes into a bear market. Now, I mean, it's fine years later, but I'm kind of at that point where I think you guys have convinced me, always keep stables, like just have a good chunk of your portfolio as stables and earn yield that way. And then maybe you deploy the yield some other way and keep the principal. But yeah, that's kind of how I'm thinking about playing it.
I like that. There's honestly a couple of days where I'm thinking, to sell my entire portfolio and just be a stable yield farmer and airdrop farmer and be more relaxed that way. But on the other hand, I still think there's like so many opportunities in this market where I want to be allocated, and it's fun being allocated. So I like the current split that I have in my portfolio, this like 50-50 split of stables and allocated capital. With that being said, good 15-ish minutes left in the show. Want to get into the next headline, which is to do with a couple of news from around the SEC, which I thought are relevant and which I think you'll have a lot to say on as well, knowing that you are quite interested in the RWA space, to put it like that. And that is coming from an article on Cointelegraph, where the SEC says that DePIN tokens are, so decentralized physical infrastructure networks, are fundamentally outside of their jurisdiction. They won't take enforcement action against blockchain-based DePIN tokens that came via a no action letter, specifically speaking to 00, saying that this is not a security. And a couple more points that were interesting as a result of that is, that Hester said that the no action letter offers an opportunity to reflect on how we as regulators can foster innovation without expanding our reach beyond what Congress has mandated. And quoting from that, the Congress created the Securities and Exchange Commission to oversee the securities market, not to regulate all economic activity. And treating such tokens as securities, another quote, that is, would suppress the growth of networks of distributed providers of service. So definitely saying that they would see this as a block to innovation, and they don't want to do that. And adjacent to that, another piece of news, also coming via SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce, expressing openness to working with industry participants on tokenizing products, and basically also talking about the size of the tokenization market, which is currently valued at $31 billion, growth potential of $2 trillion by 2030. Have to love these big numbers. But I think the key point to make here is, on the one hand, that they are clearly seeing fields of high innovation like DePIN, where they're seeing a use case that clearly is not a security from a crypto perspective, that they do not want to regulate, or don't even see it as part of the mandate to regulate, and that they also have expressed this invitation that they're willing to work with people who want to tokenize whatever things they want to tokenize, and inviting them to reach out to them to speak to that. And I thought this is quite relevant, because it's another piece of news from this like reformed SEC that we're seeing, that is way more crypto friendly, that is way more innovation friendly. And I know that the RWA space is something we speak about on the show, I would argue, quite often, and it has maybe lived a bit in a gray area of not knowing if it could force, if it could see enforcement action being forced on them, if the SEC, how the SEC is looking at them. So I feel like this no action letter providing this clarity, especially as someone who is deeply interested in the DePIN side of things, is a very, very positive signal. But curious to hear your commentary on that as well, Phunky.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, this is the SEC we've always wanted for many, many years. Shout out Crypto Mom for having these great sound bites and just talking about stuff. I mean, I have it right here, talking about DePIN, a helium miner that I've been running since 2020. And, I have a giant 8 gigahertz, looks like a lightsaber, like in the window, just to help get the signal further. And I think it makes a lot of sense in the case of DePIN, global stake. We do a lot with decentralized storage, for instance, protocols such as RWAs, Filecoin, working with new ones like Iris or Shelby, which is being developed by Aptos Labs, or Walrus Nodes, which is from Miston Labs. So like, I think whether it's centralized storage, or if it's, stuff like helium, or there's the new one that does like the Wi-Fi in India, DABA, I think is the name of it. When you're talking about it, for those who hear DePIN bandied about all the time, decentralized physical infrastructure, that's literally what DePIN is. So it makes a ton of sense. Like, the token is just used to somehow operate the network, or do governance or many of the other kinds of utilities that we're used to seeing in the crypto landscape. But you're actually talking about physical infrastructure. Like these are real world things that are just being brought on chain through various means. And so I think that that really just bodes well that the SEC is already saying this, like 00. We're working with that team ourselves, right? And you know, Austin, and he comes out of the Solana Foundation, and what they're trying to do is build like network speed that is far greater than the internet to allow Solana to kind of just get to the next leg of where they believe it could go. So I mean, it's just when you put all these things together, I think it's bullish for the industry. Or just having come from the RWA summit, which was hosted by Centrifuge just a couple weeks ago. I mean, I despair to truly articulate how much Tradfi is very, very focused on this part of the industry. And when you think about who's going to move the needle, it's the people who are at the RWA summit, like Franklin Templeton, right? Like these massive Ernst & Young, right? Like big Tradfi giants that have way more pull than any of us in the crypto industry. So if they're the ones pounding on the table saying like, we want clarity around all these things so we can move onto blockchain rails and we can have true tokenization, whether it's DePIN or beyond, like all of this stuff, I think bodes very, very well for the industry. So I'm not surprised to see it. I think that it will hasten us getting to that 2 trillion. I mean, I know the number sounds absurd, but in the context of where we are as just crypto, right? I mean, we're worth 4 trillion. That's nothing. That is such a drop in the bucket for all of TradFi. And if it's going to gain efficiencies by going to blockchain rails and tokenizing these things and allow the facilitation of trade to happen 24/7 rather than these kind of antiquated, you know, ways that we do things with, you know, clearinghouses through brokerages, and the whole system is just so badly outdated, needs a really good refresh, you know. So I'm excited for all this stuff, and I think we need to continue, and we probably will continue to see more news like this coming out of the SEC.
Love that. Since we're on the topic and we have a bit of time left, you said you were at the RWA summit. Tradfi is extremely interested in that segment as well. Can you speak a bit more about the takeaways from the summit, about the specific things that Tradfi you think is most interested in? Is it exactly the new payment rails, the more efficient brokerage? Are they looking at AI infrastructure as well? Like, what are the things that is catching their attention most in your opinion?
I think the first thing, first and foremost for them, all of them broadly speaking, is they're super interested in DeFi, right? Like, I mean, we are talking about people who their number one word in their lexicon always is yield. How can we earn yield? And we look, you and I know this, right? Look at Project X, right? Like, I mean, we're making insane amounts of money on these DeFi, you know, protocols because you're just getting rid of all the intermediaries. You're allowing peer-to-peer transactions rather to happen, you know, and then those feeds based on the velocity of capital and everything else, they want a part of that action really badly. So I think that was number one, is just like, how do we take traditional finance and comport that to DeFi so we can get in on these kinds of yields, right? They're looking at taking things such as indices. Again, just another shout out to Centrifuge. Like, they just announced, because they have a partnership with Janus Henderson. This is a legacy TradFi institution that's been around for decades. That is, I forget how many billions of AUM. And they partner with them to bring several of their funds on chain, because Nick Cherney, this I don't know what his exact role is at Janus Henderson. For years, he's been pounding the table within that organization saying, like, you need to pay attention to crypto and blockchain, because this is going to make things a lot easier for all of us. And we can gain, you know, when you think about, yeah, it might be bips, we might be talking 50 bips or whatever, but like, and that doesn't sound like a lot when you're talking 0.5%. But when you're moving billions of dollars and you're doing these things at scale, that adds up very, very quickly, right? Like, the compounding of that yield is something that you can't ignore. So I think that we're going to see stocks, I think equities, tokenization, they're super interested in that beyond just like DeFi broadly speaking. And Centrifuge just recently, with their partnership with Janus Henderson, effectively just tokenized the S&P 500. They just had an announcement that I talked about on, you know, I quoted it like 3 days ago or something like that. So we're going to continue to see, and, you know, Baji, who's a CEO, and, you know, she basically said, like, indices make the first bit of sense, because most investors, right, think about what they're going to invest in. Indices. They're not trying to pick individual stocks. They're not necessarily trying to look for FANG, but I think you're going to start with ETFs and indices being tokenized. That comes on chain, makes it very easy, much more secure because you're on blockchain rails, for whether that's for the Tradfi bros or just retail plebs like me to actually get exposure. And then you can use those things, because it's DeFi, very easily as collateral. You can't do that in a brokerage account. Like, it's hard to, unless maybe you're an accredited investor and you have tons of shares and stuff like that, you usually can't get access to using whatever shares you have as collateral to take a loan or do anything else like that. DeFi just makes all these things very, very antiquated, these old ideas. And just, so I think by and large, everybody who got up on stage, whatever panel they were on, they were just excited for what tokenization will unleash and how TradFi can earn greater yields with greater efficiencies by doing all this stuff on chain.
I love that. And I love the part about using your stocks as collateral. Something I can do with my stockbroker. I think in Europe, that's an easier feature to access. However, the LTV on that is horrible. The cost is horrible. It's not competitive. If I want to switch, that's like, I don't know how this works in the States, but if I want to switch my stocks from one brokerage account to another and like migrate my stocks, it's incredibly expensive. It's frustrating. Takes a shit ton of time. It's just not a feasible thing to do. But if we get this entire infrastructure set up on chain, and I can basically go to an aggregator and see who's offering me the best loan terms to borrow against my S&P 500, my MSCI World, or my Tesla stocks, whatever that might look like, who has the best interest rate, who has the most attractive LTV that they offer me, and then I can do that. I'm not like stuck within the confinement of being with my broker and having to take the offer or having to figure out how I am supposed to migrate those shares to another account, which is so cumbersome. And I think it's probably the same experience in the States if you want to switch from one brokerage account to another.
Until Brad talked about that one-click switch with Hood, which blew my mind. Like, because yes, it is like that. Typically, like when you've had to, like, even when I first started our Roth IRAs, for instance, it was with a company called Scottrade in the United States. Scottrade was then bought up by TD Ameritrade. And so then we had to wait for this process. And it was really frustrating because, like, my cost basis on my original purchases for really old stocks, many of which I've gotten out of, like, just vanished. Like, it just went away. Like, I'm like, wait, what? Like, how am I supposed to even calculate like my gains? Not that it matters, it was all tax-free and a Roth, but still, like, it's just frustrating to have that data go away. And then it happened again with Charles Schwab bought out TD Ameritrade and they merged and it became Schwab. And now I have a Schwab account. And every single time there was a lag in terms of just like the data, getting the funds rolled over and everything else to, you know, it might have only been like a few days or whatever. But it was just really a cumbersome process. And when Brett talked about how like you have this one-click thing that he could just port his whole thing over to Hood, that is pretty innovative. I'll give Robinhood that. But yes, I mean, you would never be able to do most of these things with a traditional, you know, kind of brokerage. Whereas, you know, just the other day, I think I shared the story of, because I'm trying to farm more stuff on Hyper AVM, and I just like took a third of a Bitcoin and I went to Felix because I wanted to do something on Felix, and I just took a low LTV to where like my liquidation point's 86K. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to worry about that. Took 20K, and then I farmed out those stables, and it was like that. I mean, it was so easy, and I was done in like, I don't know, 90 seconds. It was crazy. Love DeFi.
Exactly. Yeah. Beautiful words. Love DeFi too. We have 1 minute left, and this is what I'm going to do. Speed run the last headline and close the show for the day. And that is to do with Kazakhstan launching the LM crypto fund that comes via the official government website of Kazakhstan. And it was established by the Ministry of Artificial Intelligence. They do have a Ministry of Artificial Intelligence, which I quite like. And digital development, it's managed by the Kazakhstan Venture Group. And the partner of the fund is, unsurprisingly, Binance Kazakhstan. And in partnership with Binance Kazakhstan, the fund is making its very first investment by acquiring BNB. It is said that they see it as a long-term hold. CZ did post about that as well, that quote unquote is the Kazakhstan national crypto reserve, BNB being the first token added to that. found it interesting, wanted to point it out towards the end of the show. That being said, Phunky, thank you so much for joining me on stage today. Thank you to everyone in the audience for listening in. We will upload the episode as per usual to Spotify and Apple Music. Phunky, you have a final comment? Go for it.
Very nice. I think with Kazakhstan, you got to throw some Borat in there, right?
Love it. Also wish you a very nice Tuesday. We're going to be back tomorrow, same place, same time, 7 a.m. Eastern time.
See you, gang.